Hello, and welcome to episode 16 of the Lost Decades podcast, covering the years negative 1570 to negative 1550.
I've never heard it referred to that way. It threw me off for a second. We're at negative 1570. I mean, you're not wrong. I just
It's,
never thought
it's,
of it that
it's
way.
accurate.
It is
We're
accurate.
getting
It is quite
mathematical
accurate.
this episode. So this week I would say the main topics are going to be Egypt because 1550 marks the beginning of the New Kingdom.
The
So we
18th
won't
dynasty.
really obviously go super into it, but it's like we'll introduce the concept of the New Kingdom and talk about why this is like the dividing line. And just because I can't let them go, we're going to talk about the Hittites again. So
Oh,
um, I think this hopefully will be useful for people because I know for me it was kind of useful to like refresh my memory and kind of just because, last episode was so much about Babylon getting sacked by the Hittites that I wanted to talk more about them. And selfishly, I feel like this podcast is also a way for me to get it straight for myself. So saying that loud helps
I was gonna
me.
say, I was so into the Hittites for like a few weeks, and now I'm a little
Wow,
jealous that you're
you're
so
over
into
them
them.
now. They're
Yeah,
not cool anymore.
they're not cool. I've moved on. Are you kidding me? That's like kid stuff.
They're
So,
like the new oh god, I already forgot their name. Those little dolls people would have everywhere.
oh, we're talking about Labubus?
Labubus. They went
Labubu's? Yeah,
the
dude,
way
are
of
you
the
kidding me? It's
Labubu.
all about Nitos now. So,
Oh yeah, I've had a Nido for like over a year. Probably
wow,
for 2 years. Yeah.
got a baller over
Yeah.
here. You should sell it. You should, what's
I
it
mean,
called?
when you hang out with
Trading?
fourth graders all the
Digit
time,
trading?
you get into some cool stuff. All right, so let's just start with Egypt. And there is this guy who I feel like kind of sounds different than a lot of the other pharaohs we've talked about. His name was Sekenenre Tao.
Yes.
Do you want to tell
And
us
in my
about him?
notes, I kept calling him the first half of my notes, I kept calling him Second Enray, and the second half of my notes, I kept calling him Tao. And I was like, I don't know why I did that.
Probably just got tired of writing Second
I
Emperor.
think it was. In fact, I was writing it so much my phone kept auto-correcting. It kept being like, "Did you mean second Ekray?" I was like, "I did, but I'm surprised you knew
Oh
that."
wow, so you were typing your notes on your phone.
Oh yeah, I do it on my phone a lot. I mean, it's easier on the computer, but it's just I do it on my phone a lot.
All
So,
right. So
um,
tell us about this man.
I mean, it what we talked about last time was like how the Hyksos and Thebes were kind of like they're not really even in an alliance. Some people rumored that maybe the Thebians, because again, we're calling them the 16th dynasty. Well, this the 17th, sorry. But the 16th was also based in Thebes. That they're not even really rulers of Upper Egypt. They're just kind of
No,
like
they're not.
Thebes in the surrounding area. And so the second half of the 17th dynasty was when they're finally like, okay, we're tired of living under the thumb of the Hyksos and dealing with the Nubians, and we're actually going to do something about it. They were very prideful, like Sekenenre Tao. I'll just call him Tao. It's easier. Tao was very um prideful. Same with his son,
I mean, all
but
these you can't not be prideful and be like a ancient king. I feel like because
no,
then you
true, but to be fair, it's because the 17th dynasty before this were proud, but not to the degree of war. They were like, I am happy where I'm at. I'm happy ruling Thebes and
true.
I don't need anything more. And these
Right.
guys were basically like, I will not tolerate non-Egyptians ruling any part of Egypt. And then getting to the non-Egyptian thing always throws me off because it's like, yes, they're not ethnically Egyptian,
But who's
but
not?
they were born and raised for several generations in Egypt. I don't understand how that doesn't make you
Are you
Egyptian,
talking
but
about the Hyksos or what?
yeah, the Hyksos. The Hyksos are literally been for at least 100 years living in Egypt. Even more, actually,
They
probably
probably
like
spoke a
200.
different language.
I mean, yeah, that is fair, and probably a slightly different writing style, I think.
I
Um,
mean, think about how divided people are now when they even if they have a bunch in common. They
No,
just
that's true. I mean, they even, and I'm sure this would be sacrilegious now, but even back then it's probably a big deal. Is yeah, they built their temples and they built their palaces in a slightly different style.
right.
So
They had probably
we
slightly
can't
different
have none of
gods.
that.
And
But
yeah,
so anyway, Tao essentially is like, I'm not doing this. We're going to war. And so he declares war on the Hyksos. In fact, what's so funny, in almost like an ironic way, it's like someone back in time had did it on purpose. We have a scroll called the Quarrel of Apepi and Sequenere, or Tau, if you will, but it was written in the 19th dynasty. Anyway, it explains why they went to war and like what they're doing. And so apparently, Apepi wanted to slander Tau. He wanted to be like, "Oh, like these guys suck." He wanted to kind of provoke them because he knew he was stronger. And he was trying to think of a reason to get mad at them and like why. And one of the reasons he came up with was supposedly hippos. Your hippos make too much noise and we can't
yeah.
go in the
Remember, I
water.
brought that up last week.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No, and so what I thought was funny though is right when you're gonna find out like what happened next, they said supposedly Tao was like talking to his generals. He's like, "We need a response, and here's what we're gonna say." Literally, apparently, it's like right there where he's like, "Here's what we're gonna say." The scroll cuts off, and we have no idea what happens after that. Um, which I just thought was hilarious. I don't know. It's like the end of, well, I don't want to spoil it, but it's also a really old show. So it's the end of The Sopranos where it cuts to black in mid
Mm.
sentence. But it's just sort of like, all right, here's what we're gonna. It's
Yeah.
like, all right,
And my last words will be
Castle.
so, but basically, so Senecre started it, but then his son Kamos continues it for 3 years, and
Well, the
then that
big thing I wanted to say that's
right.
crazy
Yeah.
about Tao is just
Yeah.
that, because you're right, we're about to move on to his son, is that
Okay.
the
Right.
reason he died was he was so intense. He was fighting on the front lines, hand to hand
Right.
combat, just getting in the thing. And they're pretty sure he just died in combat. It's possible he got captured as a prisoner and then
Makes
killed,
sense.
but essentially he was just front of the lines, Jedi Knighting it and just fighting in the front and just stabbing everyone and then just died. And in fact, what I thought was interesting too is we have his body. We found his body, and so they've done scans and stuff like that on him, and they realized that they didn't remove his brain, they didn't remove his heart, and his embalming was rushed. And what they think happened, and this is just guessing, is that they were probably running away from the Hyksos army that was chasing them and didn't really have a lot of time to deal with it, so they kind of just rushily just put it together and put him in just a tomb and left. And then that leads to, yeah, I didn't mean to cut you off. Then that leads to his son, um, Kamos, or some people said Kamose, but I feel like it's Kamos.
Who
But
knows? Yeah.
no, and to be fair, no one knows. That is the truth.
Yeah.
Took over, and him and the Thebians wanted revenge because they were like, yeah, we're not, no, you can't just kill our king and just everything's good. No,
Actually, yeah, the one thing I did you say this? Like the Senecre guy, his dad, in like the mummy, wasn't his face like all smashed up and stuff too?
it is, and that's why they're saying they don't know if he was killed in combat or if he was executed as a prisoner of war. And one of the reasons is he has axe marks on his face, but they said they can't tell if that's from combat or from people hastily trying to cut his skull open to remove his brain for
Mm.
the embalming ritual. They're not sure.
That's
So,
what's interesting is for like a lot of Egyptian history, there's one pharaoh. He has like that crown that has both,
mhm.
aspects of like the upper and lower Egypt on it. And it's kind of this whole concept of like he's the voice of Ra, and he's almost he is a
Amen.
god. Yeah, Amun-Ra. And but then when there's two Egypts, it's kind of weird that they're both like, no, I'm the pharaoh. And I wonder that must have made it kind of weird. I guess they both just saw the other one as like a pretender to like he
To be
wasn't the
fair, they
real.
kind of did, but Avaris was seen as kind of the true pharaoh because they controlled most of Egypt. And again, these guys, at least historically, from what we're looking at, were kings, not pharaohs. I'm not like at least from the Theban perspective.
Okay,
So
true.
yeah, it's kind of crazy.
So then, but then even Kamos, he only pushes for about 3 years, and then he dies, and his brother, Amos the First, who is the probably the son of um his mother Ahotep.
Yeah, and the one thing
And
they weren't sure of that I don't know if you maybe know more of, I was trying to look into it, is how Kamos died. Because I thought, like, with the other one, they're like, oh, maybe he died in combat, maybe he was a prisoner of war, maybe like something else happened.
yeah,
Kamos, they're basically just like, I don't know, he just like suddenly died, and we don't know why.
yeah, I
So
didn't look into it, but
what I
just
thought was interesting though is when Amos took over,
yeah.
it's actually he didn't because he was so young that his mom ran the
Mhm.
war for a while, and it actually lasted for another 10 years.
You're
And
saying,
Kamos was very pride. The one thing I put was that he
yeah,
was so prideful because the only thing we know about Kamos are these two monoliths that were in Karnak. There we go. That was the area they found the two monoliths. And it talks about his plan. And obviously it could be very likely his propaganda afterwards or something like that. But the whole point was he wanted to push because he said, I won't tolerate non-Egyptians ruling anywhere in Egypt. And then his advisors were like, no, we're happy, like we got more territory from your dad, like we control this, we don't need to control all of Egypt, wait till they fight us, and if they attack us then we'll go for it, but we're not going to start a war. And he was basically like, no, Egyptian honor matters too much to me, I'm willing to risk everything, which could be true but also could be very believable propaganda. So it's like
well, I guess yeah. For the specifics of what he does, he has three failed assaults on Avaris, and then on the fourth, he takes the city. And then the Hyksos have a last refuge at Sharahin, which is near Gaza.
yeah.
And Amos has Avaris demolished rather than occupied. He just completely destroys the capital of the old regime. And this moment is treated as the birth of the new kingdom of Egypt.
Yeah, and the one thing I'll
So,
look into it more for next time is why it's considered a new dynasty, because I get that it's a new like phase, but all I'm getting at is
yeah.
he's got the same last name, if you will, because we don't know what it is, but like his brother was also pharaoh for the 17th dynasty. I don't know why
Yeah.
he is the 18th. Like I don't know
I
what.
think though, well, because it does say that. So again, we mentioned it before, but Manetho, all this Egyptian stuff we get from this guy Manetho, who was writing in the third century BC, so over a
So he was
thousand
very
years
close to it. Yeah, I can tell.
later. Yeah, during the reign of Ptolemy the Second, in this thing Egyptiaca, and basically he just considered it a big enough event that it's the start of a new dynasty. Like, because it's not the first time he does that. Is basically the thing. Is that like he just kind of treats any major shift as a new dynasty, and it kind of makes sense in a certain way. I do understand it because there's whatever the 17th dynasty is in around Thebes, and then suddenly now it's all connected again. It's a different like title. It's like a different role, It's like instead of just being the Theban pharaoh, you're now suddenly the only Egyptian pharaoh. So it kind of makes sense to start fresh and be like, I'm kind of the beginning of a new thing.
But one of the key things too, because it has to do with the 18th dynasty and the remnants of the 17th, is because again the 17th and the 16th were around Thebes, and that was like what they controlled. The 18th dynasty's capital is like Thebes, and
It's
like
still
that's
Thebes,
where they
yeah.
control everything from, because that is the center of where they started from. That is their power.
Yeah, that the capital of Egypt definitely moves around quite a bit over time. And it's also just funny. I wanted to say that we are only on episode 16. We're still in the 1500s BC, and we're in the new kingdom of Egypt.
Yeah.
That's how old Egypt is.
We did most of the Middle Kingdom though, which I thought was cool. We did most of the
We
Middle
basically did the
Kingdom
whole Middle Kingdom, yeah.
and the second intermittent period, and now we're finally in the New Kingdom, and we're still in 1500 BC.
Yeah. And one thing I thought was interesting was that I guess everything we kind of know about the siege of Avaris is from invaluable military commentary on the back of this rind mathematical papyrus. So some sort of like mathematical formula, and just someone had scribbled on the back some sort of military commentary, or they had reused the paper and used the other side or something. But that's the only proof we have of like the. But that's what's kind of cool is whenever we do have like detailed evidence of a certain battle, and you can actually know like the amount of people that were in it and the weapons they used or their tactics or something. Did you read about this intercepted letter?
Yes. I thought that was interesting too. How he asked the king of Kush, he was like, "Oh, if you join me, we'll like split essentially the 17th dynasty's territory in half." And
Yeah,
what I thought was so funny is that
the
spurred him to
Hyksos
go
sent the
farther.
letter.
That spurred him to go farther because he was like, "Oh, they're desperate. They're asking for other people for help, so we should like go for it."
Yeah, they wanted to team up there on either side of Thebes, so they wanted to do like a pincer move, and then yeah,
But
the
it makes sense that
Camos
it didn't
intercepted the
happen.
letter.
Not
What?
just because of intercepting the letter, but it's something we didn't talk about, but I had it in my notes, is that before before Kamos attacked the north, he went down and attacked the Nubians and Kush in the south and pushed them all the way back and took some of their old fortresses, who actually immediately surrendered to him because they still had Egyptian lineage. They'd just been kind of dealing with the Nubians at the time and were like tolerating it. But when Egypt came down, they're like, "Oh, no, 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 we're with you." They're like, "Don't get confused." Like, we're with you. And I thought that was crazy that it's smart that he went down and essentially crushed all the Nubians and pushed them all the way back. He reconquered Wawat, which hadn't happened since the Middle Kingdom, and basically reconquered it and was like, "Yeah, this is under my territory now," and then turned around and invaded the north with all that extra gold and all that extra food and everything.
And did you see that he sent the letter back to the Avaris? Like not
I actually
exactly.
didn't see that. No, wait. So what did he do?
He
Sent it.
sent it back to the city of Apophis, which is a town about 100
Mhm.
miles south of Avaris. Um, so just kind of being like, I got you. Like I got the letter. And then yeah, he reunites Upper and Lower Egypt and starts the final kingdom period of Egypt. That's also the time that has most of the famous pharaohs that you've ever heard of.
Not
So
just New Kingdom, the 18th dynasty specifically is the one that
mm,
has like King Tut and, Sekenenrat or whatever her name is. I can't remember. Sorry, but like two famous Egyptian queens, King Tut. We're just getting a lot of stuff that is from the 18th dynasty. Is like when you think Egypt, Valley of the Kings, all that stuff. That is who you're thinking of, the 18th. I think that's even with Ramses the second. Don't quote me on it, but I believe that's Ramses the second with like the Moses and the Jews and all that stuff.
well,
That's
yeah,
all
because I mean,
dynasty.
the interesting thing is that almost any historical event that you've ever heard of hasn't happened yet. Um, so that's what's kind
Except
of
building the
nice.
pyramids.
They built the pyramids, right? I just mean, yeah, yeah, true. Not obviously not every single one, but just almost anything that's even in the Bible that's based on some sort of historical thing hasn't really happened. So,
Basically, in the Bible, we're still in Genesis. That's what's so crazy.
yeah.
Like
So I was gonna move on to
Hittites.
Mesopotamia.
Wait, what'd you say? Sorry.
Yeah, I was gonna start with the Hittites, but just
Oh, no, no,
general
fair enough.
Anatolia.
Anatolia. No, 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 that works. I misheard you. Yeah.
I did say Mesopotamia, but it's technically Anatolia. I did see this picture I thought was kind of just interesting. It's just showing Canaan and just the geography is pretty unique. It has right on so it's obviously you know, I don't know if to say the eastern coast of the Mediterranean or the western, it's the eastern side of the
You
Mediterranean.
mean it's the west side of the map, but it's the Eastern
Yeah.
Mediterranean.
But
Yeah.
there's like this coastal plain, and that's kind of the area where eventually, spoilers, Egypt is gonna get really freaked out about the Hyksos thing. They're gonna be like, we don't want that to happen again, and they're gonna conquer up into this coastal plain and sort of take that over. But then there's the hill country, and actually most of the major cities you've heard of, which I'm blanking on any of the names, but like Hebron and like I can't think of names, but they're all in the hill country. And then the Jordan Rift has like the Sea of Galilee and the Dead Sea, but it doesn't really get any rain because it's between these two mountain ranges, and most of the water there is super salty. Apparently, the northern part is better for agriculture and has better water and stuff than the south. And then there's this Transjordan Plateau, which is just the plateau before you get to the mountains.
Just
But
how much
anyway,
more it is than sea level.
it's weird. Yeah, it's just sort of a really strange little area. And it also, on top of all that, It's smack dab in between Egypt and all the stuff going on in Mesopotamia and all the stuff going on with the Hyksos. Or sorry, not the Hyksos, the
Not the
Hittites.
Hyksos, the Hittites. Yeah.
I know there's a lot of H words because there's also like the Haitians. So I guess looking at this map real quick, there's a couple things. So first of all, there's the Hittites. They're based around Hattusa. They're kind of just right here in the middle of, I guess, the eastern half of like Anatolia. And then there's the Luwians, and apparently the Luwian language was kind of similar to the Hittite language. I think they're similar people. Um, and then Kizuwatna is actually on the other side of these mountains. So there's like this mountain range that's south of the Hittites, but then there's still kind of a mountain range between them and like Syria.
Yeah,
So they're
because
in
they're in
this
like a
weird
big
little
valley.
pocket.
I remember
Yeah,
you
they're in
talking
like
about
this
them last.
strange, yeah. And so here's another. Anyway, I have a bunch of
Like right
random
there, we see Ardana or whatever that is.
Adana, yeah.
Ardana.
And it's
Yeah.
yeah, and you can see based on the color, it's actually a nice like lowland area that you can farm and everything. Whereas most of Anatolia is very rocky. So also I just got really into mountains based on all this stuff. So I found these pictures of different mountains, and there's a lot in this area. The Pontic up on the northern part, touching the Black Sea, and then there's I guess the Anatolian highlands. The Taurus Mountains are the ones at the bottom. So on the other side of the Taurus Mountains is where the Kizara or Kizawa is, and then like I said, the Canaan has like the Levant ranges. There's the Zagros Mountains. We kept talking about the Zagros
Mhm.
Mountains where Elam is, Susa, and I think the Kassites come out of the Zagros Mountains too.
They do.
So they're the ones that conquer Babylon. Before I get there, though, I did want to talk about the Hittites. Here's even more mountains. We got
Yeah, you were on a mountain spree.
I really did because it's if you think about it, all this stuff is basically happening because of geography. Not all of it, but so much of it is guided by it. Like just where there's mountains, it's going to separate people.
Well, yeah, the Ural Mountains aren't they like one of the separators, and the Caucasus separators from Europe with Asia?
Yeah, the Caucasus. There's the Hindu Kush in like sort of
Asians.
before you get to India, the Himalayas. Yeah, so mountain ranges are pretty important stuff. And also, there's
Oh,
another real
wow, we're
quick.
going back far.
Just
Okay, we're
yeah,
gonna
I just
do
thought it was
decade
interesting.
by
I think it's
decade, starting with
interesting.
the Triassic.
Exactly. Well, I think I mean, it's all related because it's all. I feel like the Hittites and the Kassites, they're very related. They're both instances of people that like using horses, and they
I actually
come
know
down into the lower area and conquer the lowland.
it's funny because I do know Gondwana and the Tethys Sea pretty well because again I was dinosaur obsessed. So
Yeah,
Triassic, Jurassic,
just when
Cretaceous,
I
all
guess
that.
the mountains got me into it because these two things crashing into each other is what caused a lot of these mountains. But it used to be a sea, and then it kind of got swallowed up, and that's what turned. So you can see here, it's about to close up between it and the Atlantic. Not fully close up, but almost close
Mhm.
up. It and the Indian, and even the Paratethys up here will become like the Caspian and the Black Sea. So anyway, yeah, I definitely went down some rabbit holes. And here, and I realized I haven't shown like.
Mesopotamia is basically all of Iraq, which is crazy.
Yeah, and then Iran, kind of the western part of Iran is like the Elamites, and then Turkey is the Hittites. So
Hmm.
let's get into it. So the Hittite language is the oldest historically attested Indo-European language, and
And
modern.
written. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I mean, like written language. Modern interest in the Hittites increased with the founding of the Republic of Turkey in 1923. During this period, the new field of Hittitology also influenced the naming of Turkish institutions such as the state-owned Edi Bank, which just means literally Hittite Bank. um, and there's this Museum of the Anatolian Civilizations in Ankara, which is like 100 miles west of Hattusa, which I'm going to talk about. And it has the most comprehensive exhibit of Hittite art. And apparently, in the Bible, Judah and the Hittites were never enemies, In the Book of Kings, they supplied the Israelites with cedar, chariots, and horses. And in the Book of Genesis, they were friends and allies to Abraham. Uriah the Hittite was a captain in King David's army and counted as one of his mighty men in First Chronicles 11, 1 Chronicles 11. Um, so I thought this. So we're going back, but just setting like where the Hittites came from. Um, there's this period where there were the Assyrian merchants, and they came in and they had like set up this town, a couple towns, I guess called Karams, and like the westernmost of those were in this area, and one of them was Kanesh, which is also called Nessa. So it's kind of confusing. I guess they sound similar. It's like Nessa,
Hmm.
Kanesh. Um, and sometime around 1700, Kanesh was destroyed, which kind of destroyed the Assyrian like trading system. So they were kind of connected with these other areas we've been talking about in Mesopotamia up to that point. And yeah, so that, like I said, Kanesh had a big one, and they traded local tin and wool for luxury items, spices, woven fabrics from the Assyrian homeland and with Elam. And there's just this thing where they wrote in Old Assyrian, but they had like random Hittite loanwords and names like thrown in. So it was just kind of interesting to think about. That's how they were first seeing like Hittite written down. And there's just random, I guess, examples. There was quite a bit of like tablets they actually found from the Hittites from this time. So there's this woman, Zizi. No, it's not Zizi. It's Zizizi. There's Z
It's even weirder than I thought.
Z.
Zizzy, I'm like, what a weird name. You're like, oh, it's not Zizzy. That'd be ridiculous. It's
It's
Zizzy.
Zizizi. And apparently she became a successful money lender, and she provided support. Basically, she helped support the idea that women did have like crucial roles in like managing finances and all that kind of stuff. And there was this other woman, Taram Kubi, who lived in Asser, while her husband lived and worked in Kanesh,
Okay.
and she was married. So his name was Inaya, and they would communicate through cuneiform clay tablets transported by caravans, which kind of makes sense because they're merchants, so they're already trading. You know, he's sending her stuff to, or she's sending him stuff to sell, so she can send messages along with it. But it's kind of funny that it's a husband and wife, and she would also craft textiles that she would send, and he would like send silver back. And she apparently was wealthy because she had enough money to lend silver to her brother so he could purchase a house. She covered a debt her husband had to the city administration in Asser, um, and she worked with authorities to resolve a lawsuit her husband had involved in regarding suspicious sales of lapis lazuli. So he was doing some sketchy stuff. Like, I wonder if he was like painting rocks blue or something. I bet even back then it's hard to
He's
paint
playing too much
something.
Minecraft. Lapis Lazuli.
Yeah. And she would like write down, like she'd have arguments with her husband about certain things, but she would also like they'd write about how they missed each other. And like one time she got mad at him because he took all the barley before he left for Kanesh, and then there was a famine. So she had no food for her and their child, which is
Wow.
pretty dark. Um, yeah, it was just kind of a fun example. But then, like I said, it all kind of collapsed around like 1600. Um, I don't know the time period exactly, but moving on to this guy, Anita.
Hmm.
So Anita, well, his dad was Pithana, and they're kind of the forerunners of the later Hittite kings. And there's this text called the Anita text, and it's the earliest inscription in the Hittite language, and basically any Indo-European
Yeah, I
language.
was gonna say oldest recorded Indo-European text.
Yeah. And so, okay, so like I said, the city Kanesh got attacked by the king of this area, Zalpua, and he carried off the city's idol of their god Zeus. And then this guy Pithana, who was the king of this area, Kusara, he conquered, then he later on conquered Kanesh, but he says he did it in the night by force, but did not do evil to anyone in it. So he somehow just must have come with an army at night and been like, I'm going to destroy your city right now unless you just completely surrender. That's what it seems like to me. And so then he is the ruler of Kanesh, and then his son becomes the ruler, but eventually they revolt against him, but Anita quashes the revolt, and he actually then switches and makes Kanesh his capital. And then so then he goes and invades Zulpawa, who had
Mhm.
stolen the idol, and he captures their king and he recovers the idol. Um, and then let's see, he also had a campaign against Purushanda, and they just surrendered also without a fight. So he was kind of a badass. He would just keep going in and like people would just immediately
I
surrender.
mean, he, guess he's doing what some of the other people would do. You just make an example out of one of the cities because, again, he did Hattusa. He put a curse on them and was like, "We're going to destroy you. No one will ever live here. We're going to kill everyone." And then when anyone else like came across him, they're like, "You know what? We'll just surrender. It's actually not that big a deal." In
Yeah.
fact, isn't he the one who sent like the scepter of iron,
I
right?
was just gonna say, so literally the
Yeah.
guy I just said, the king of Perush, he presented Anita with an iron throne and an iron scepter, which were symbols of supreme authority in a period when iron was more valuable than gold. Because if you think about it, we are deep in the middle of the Bronze Age, so we are not in the Iron Age.
And
So
that's the thing is
iron,
gold is easy not to find, but it's easy to do stuff with. The
yeah,
reason they don't use iron at the time is it takes a lot of heat and a lot of effort and a lot of time to make something out of iron.
yeah.
So even though it's more common than gold, it's harder to work with. Whereas gold is very easy to work with. There's just not enough of it to make weapons out of
Well, not
gold.
just gold, but bronze.
True, but all I'm getting at is gold is even less common than bronze. It's just
Actually,
that
sorry, bronze is much more rare than iron, but they had the trade network back then, so they could trade it. And then if you have it, it's easier to work with. So it's harder to
true.
find than iron, but it's easier to work with.
It's way easier to work with,
Yeah.
and iron just needs, yeah, high temperatures and sustained at those high temperatures.
Yeah. So basically, sorry, I'm actually skipping some stuff. Oh, Anita, this is important. So Anita uh, did everything I just said, and then he destroys this city of Hattush, and he literally says, "Whoever after me becomes king, resettles Hattush, let the storm god of the sky strike him."
Yeah.
And then it's literally like 100 years later or less, because it does talk about. I think Anita was co-ruling with Shamsi Adad in Assyria. I want to say.
Yep.
Um, and then so Anita's descendants move their capital to Hattusa, or also Hattush, same thing. And
Because yeah,
that
that's
is when they
Silly the
start.
first.
Yeah, that's when you get Hattusili. So he names himself after it, and that's essentially the beginning of the Hittites. Is like now. But they would refer to themselves as Nasili, which is basically Kanesh. It's like Nessa Kanesh. So that's how they kind of thought of themselves, but we call them the Hittites. And but it is very actually kind of interesting because he curses this city, this like major conqueror, like this real cool guy conquers and curses and grows weeds in Hattush. And he says, not just that, he says, anyone who resettles this, let the god strike him down. And then we already talked about this, but what happens with the Hittites? You think they're going to do well. They attack, they sack Babylon, they take all these treasure and slaves, and then they fall into a dark age.
It's almost like the curse is real.
It almost really does feel like there is a curse because then after that, they keep killing each other.
They
Um,
do.
I am jumping ahead a little bit because I did want to say, going back to basically Hattusili, I just read that he might have been responsible for reintroducing cuneiform to Anatolia when he
Mhm.
was doing his battles. When he said he attacked Aleppo, and he might have picked up on cuneiform and brought it back with him. Even though they had actually used it before in that earlier period when Assyria had their merchant colonies, they would use writing, but then it kind of went away until Hattusili. and that evidence is supported by the fact that I guess the cuneiform they used was closer to the Syrian cuneiform than the Akkadian or Babylonian cuneiform. And he might have even brought Syrian scribes back with him to Anatolia. So, as we said last week, this guy Mursili sacks Babylon, returns with the treasure. Then he gets murdered by his own brother-in-law, Hantili, and the kingdom falls into chaos. Hantili actually clings to power for about 30 years, but around 1560, things come apart, and his own co-conspirator's son-in-law, Zidanta,
Which is
kills
funny because he
Hantili.
killed his father-in-law. So,
Yeah, it's all coming together. He kills Hantili's heir, Pisini, along with Pisini's children and closest servants, and seizes the throne for himself. And he rules from about 1560 to 1550.
and then he is also assassinated
And then he is also assassinated. By his
by
own
his own
son,
son.
Amuna.
Like I said, the curse is real.
The
Like
curse is legitimately real.
it's like
But this
they
is one that's so, yeah, getting a little ahead, but I do think it's important just to say that in case I forget, like next episode, eventually there will be this guy, Telepinu,
yeah, 1525.
1525 to 1500. So I'll probably repeat it, but it's a big moment because he writes the Edict of Telepinu, which dictates the laws of succession for the Hittite throne. And it was to stop all these murders.
Well, because essentially until that guy, everyone had taken power by killing and assassinated the person before them.
Yeah.
Like it happened so many times. I think it happens like 5 times, which is crazy.
No, it really is crazy. And we have the writing for it. It says, the Edict of Telepinu, let a prince, a son of the first rank only, be installed as king. If a prince of the first rank does not exist, then let he who is a son of second rank become king. But if there is no prince, no male issue, which means son, let them take an antient husband for she who is a first rank daughter, and let him become king. So I guess
Yeah,
the
like essentially
husband,
the eldest daughter's husband.
the eldest daughter's husband. So he
And
sets
then
it
it
in
goes down the
stone.
line that way. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's sort of what kings later are going to do the same thing. They're going to make more strict rules for the lineage.
Well,
And
and what's crazy is how, like, I know that's like kind of the point, but again, the curse being real is you have Hantusili and Marshili who conquer so much, they expand the realm so much, but then because of all this constant assassination and infighting, they just lose all the territory they gained, and it goes all the way back, and so it's basically like it was all for nothing, literally. Like they're smaller than they were when they started.
not just all for nothing, it was literally worse.
Yeah, that's what I mean. They're
Yeah.
worse off than they were before. And it's crazy because they write about it after the fact. So it's probably propaganda in some sort, but they talk about how Zindanta was like lamenting like oh, or not even Zindanta, it might have been Hattusili before that as well. We're like lamenting like, "Oh, I shouldn't have killed them. Like I can't believe I did that. I set this horrible precedent and now like I'm losing everything and everything's terrible." And it's just like, well, yeah. That's why I don't know how real it is and how much it was just, historical people being like, no, no, he regretted it. He realized how much of a bad decision he made. So,
I think that's the thing. Anytime we talk about how someone felt or like what they were thinking, I feel like it's pretty suspect unless they directly wrote it down. But even then, but
yeah,
then you
in
start
this
questioning
case, it was
history.
obvious they did it. They said it came like 100 years later, someone wrote about it. And they're like,
Yeah.
okay.
Real quick, I did want to talk about, and we're kind of seeing it on this map there. So a little bit to the east of the Hittites were this group that were, I think, somewhat connected with them, but they're called the Hurrians, and they also lived in the mountains along the upper Tigris and Euphrates rivers. And they actually took advantage of the situation where the Hittites were weak, and they seize Aleppo and the surrounding areas. And I think they also are at least connected with the group who takes over Kizuwatna, which is that little area. It's kind of in the sweet spot. It's almost like a cul-de-sac. It's
Yeah.
just surrounded by mountains, and then on one side is the water. Kind of a nice little nook right there. They're going to do their thing. And apparently, for a while, the Hittite kings are just going to be fairly weak, and really the Hurrians are going to be more of the center of power in Anatolia. And um, apparently, this happens a couple other times later on for the Hittites. They're going to expand and shrink, which we've heard before, but they especially it happens a lot to them. And yeah, before Telepinu makes his edict, um, they didn't have that system. Obviously, it was just kind of free for all. And apparently, also the king of the Hittites was not viewed as a living god like a pharaoh, but just more of like a first among equals. And it wasn't until the later period, apparently not till 1400, that it starts to become more powerful. And yeah, so oh, real quick, last thing about Kizuwatna, like I said, they apparently might have been one of the first to work with iron, and it was like meteoric iron because they had a lot of minerals over there. Kind of makes sense. They're in mountains, but especially those mountains in particular, like the Taurus Mountains, have a lot of, I think, maybe silver, but maybe like different minerals. And I won't get into this connection with the sea people, but I am excited eventually to get into. It's kind of like a domino effect, and I do feel like this area sort of not actually this area, but the people to the west of them,
Hmm.
um, I think are involved a lot with like what we think of as the sea people. I think
Yeah.
they're at least a big part
Well,
of it
kind of
'cause
like, yeah, Sardinia and all that as well, and the Minoan.
yeah, and it kind of makes sense because we hear even the Hittites are a little bit obscure, but even looking at this map, you don't really see many things on the western like coast, like where I guess Troy would be and everything. But so we don't know too much about them, but I do think they are interesting, and I might look into them for next week. I started doing it, but I think next week I might talk more about that, what's going on in that area. But that's basically all I had for the Hittites, and so we can go on to actually like Babylonia, and in the power vacuum after the Hittites leave, they come in from the Zagros Mountains, and
Well, one
they
of the key things
the
is they were
rulers.
there for a while, as they were very integrated, like with the
They were already
population.
living there, like the Hyksos were.
Yeah, kind of like the Hyksos. They were just sort of there and integrated. They just never saw themselves as ruling because there was kind of an established ruling class. And they sort of took advantage of the power vacuum and the fact that they had a lot of support from local people because they had a lot of native people who were just living there.
And I feel like probably also there's still people in like their homeland up in the mountains that
Well,
they
no,
could
no, that's true.
come in
Definitely.
and
Like,
like
yeah.
help them kind of like have an army or whatever.
Yeah, because it's kind of because I wrote down about Agum the
I
second.
yeah, I actually am glad you did because I didn't end up looking that much into him. But what
So
about
there's
him?
not much other than he's considered the first true Kassite king of Babylon, even though it's kind of weird because he's like the sixth king of that dynasty. But it's
Yeah,
more that before that, it was kind of like in flux of who was really in control, who was ruling. It was kind of an intermittent period. He's the first one to really rule and set the precedent that the Kassites are in charge. And one of the main reasons with that is when the Hittites came in and took the Marduk statue, he was able to get it back.
right.
And essentially that cemented like the gods want me. They want us to rule. They favor my family and we should be in charge. It was kind of like they're cementing. But funny enough, with that, a lot of people
Yeah.
think that the Hittites didn't even take the statue. They said this is still debated, but some people think the Hittites didn't even take the statue. It just got like destroyed or something, and the Hittites didn't care. And that taking advantage of kind of everything going on, Agum just rebuilt a statue and brought it back and was like, "Hey, I got it, guys! Like, hey, I found it!"
Oh, yeah,
Like,
I didn't. That is really funny.
but it's
I'm just
also
curious,
like
where did you see?
ingenious to
Where
think
did you
about that. Like to be like, "Hey, I mean, I found it, guys."
where did you read that? I'm just curious to see that.
A little bit was Wikipedia, and then one of the other ones was I can't remember where. It was a different website because a lot of the videos I
Okay.
watched didn't mention that.
Right.
So
It is funny. I've definitely noticed, and I guess this is what they teach you in school, but when I read, or not just read, but when I'll read, let's say, a Wikipedia article and then I'll watch a video, you really do get two different perspectives. And sometimes they kind of like don't even agree with each other. You kind of have to
yeah, and they
choose
did
like,
say this is debated. They just said they really don't think the Hyksos took it because the Hyksos, sorry, the Hittites took it because they said
Yeah.
the Hittites did take it. It'd be impossible for him to get it back. Not just because, oh, the Hittites are so strong. It's just that would be so far away. He's not marching all the way to Hattusa, capturing Hattusa and taking back the statue. They're like, that's just not happening.
Maybe,
So
but I mean, you could say the same thing for him conquering Babylon in the first place. He had to go
no, but I
all
mean, it's different because, again, the Hyksos were not nearly as strong as the Hittites were. Like, him coming all the way down and marching down and conquering was insane. Like, it hadn't been seen since Sargon of Akkad. So, they're just sort of like. And they also just said that they think the fact that it was stolen was a fabrication written later to kind
interesting.
of justify why they were in power. And I just thought it was smart. I don't know. I thought it was kind of
No,
cool.
I mean, I just thought it was smart in general to even get the statue back because you're technically a different people, but you show that you're on their side by bringing back their statue.
And funny enough, that as much as I read into him, I was like looking up different things and like Googling, and it seems like that's his main thing is just that by getting the statue back, he cements their dynasty as like we are God chosen. Like this is who the gods want to rule. And it allows Babylon and the people of Babylon, whether you're Akkadian, whether you're Sumerian, whether you're um Amorite, whether you're Kassite, that you're just like, all right, I agree with this. Like they should be in charge. Clearly the
Oh, that's
gods
a
want
good,
them.
yeah. Yeah. And that's well, the last thing I was going to say about them was that they're not fully consolidated. It's not until 1475 that Ulam Buriash will defeat E Gamil, the last king of the Sealand dynasty, the first
Yeah,
Sealand
because that's we'll talk about that next
dynasty.
time or maybe the episode after, depending on what the range
Probably in
is.
a couple.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's when they really kind of bring Babylon to its former glory.
One thing that I think that's nice about the format of the podcast is we've had this time to set the scene and like get everything established and talk about all these areas. And then in a couple episodes we are going to start moving a little bit quicker, even if we only do like a decade by decade. We'll get into the later Bronze Age and everything like that. So I think it'll be nice that we sort of understand the major players and that anything that happens now will be about some group of them getting more powerful than the other.
Yeah.
So
Because I
it'll
mean,
be cool.
Assyria, I tried to look up for them, and they're in what's considered their dark age right now, between the
Yeah,
old Assyrian period and the middle Assyrian Empire. Like they're
right.
kind of in between. They've had some rulers, but we don't know much about them. So
Yeah, they had that period where they had the merchants over in the Hittite area. That
yeah.
ended, they shrunk, and then but
Well,
we're
and not
not.
only that, they conquered like Yamhad for a little bit and Mari, remember that? And then they got
Yeah,
conquered by Hammurabi, so it kind of just like squashed that.
but I think
So
that's when that was happening. I think when they were, yeah, had that whole area was probably around when they had the colony and everything. There was one thing, like I mentioned the Arzawa. They're like the people to the west of the Hittites. One
mm,
thing that's interesting about them is so Hattusili had raided Arzawan territory and in 1650, but then later on in our time period in 1550, the Arzawans were part of a broader uprising against the Hittite king Amuna. So he technically starts in 1550 exactly. So we can talk about him next week.
yep.
Much like we'll talk about the New Kingdom. So that'll be cool.
I'm
They'll go
so
together.
excited for the new kingdom. Like
Yeah.
it's nice to have some crazy stuff happening in Egypt, and not only crazy, like the most famous stuff.
Oh, and Amuna was one of the guys we talked about. He's the guy who killed his father Zidanta. Uh,
Well, and then yeah, the new kingdom Egypt, right? I could be wrong. I need to check, but I think they basically thrive until Alexander the Great, more or less. So
that's crazy. Speaking of Alexander the Great, that's a perfect transition because I did have a quick thing about the Mycenaeans in Greece. So
ooh, I like that guy.
yeah, that this mask here, if you're seeing on video, is called the Mask of Agamemnon. Which Agamemnon is this guy who was written about in the Iliad, and in that story, he was the king of Mycenae, uh, and yeah, he was in the Trojan War in the Iliad, but they actually think because that would have been in much later time period. So they actually think this is from right now. They think it's from around 1600 to 1500 BC, or even like 1550. So it's actually older than the Trojan War, but it's a weirdly it's kind of makes it cooler, but at the same time
Yeah.
that means it's not Agamemnon.
Yeah.
But that's what's funny
Some
though
guy just
about
pressed his face into some tin. Or,
yeah,
you know what I mean, bronze.
because like obviously the ancient Greeks were very biased towards Greek things and Greek myths, but then because the European Renaissance and everything is so focused on ancient Greece and Rome, I feel like they assume everything is related to it. So it's like, oh, it must be the Mask of Ammonimnon, and
Yeah.
this must be Troy, or like that
Well,
archaeologist who
like,
actually
yeah, I was gonna
found
say the same thing.
Troy.
That famous archaeologist who was like figured out where Troy was and realized that city's been built on top of it, and then dug all the way because he's like, well, Troy's obviously the first city, and then he smashed through it, and they realized no, Troy was like the third one. So he actually went through and destroyed Troy and found whatever was before it. So
Right, because he assumed it was the oldest thing.
because he just assumed it was the oldest thing, he was
Well,
like,
that's what's
well,
interesting. He literally dug through what I'm talking about now, where it's like these ancient Arzawins, I guess, were not exactly the same thing, but a lot of this coast of Anatolia is like basically Greek people.
no, I get
Um,
what you mean. It's kind of like how the Minoans, they think that, I can't remember what they're called, but they set up colonies along the Greek coast and the Turkish coast. And essentially, those people end up later, we'll talk about them, rising up and kind of taking over the Minoans. And then that leads to more of the modern Greek culture. But it's funny how it's kind of like with the Phoenicians setting up Carthage and then Carthage becoming its own thing. Like, it's just funny when that happens. When, like,
yeah, yeah. When that's one
Or
thing I
like we
like
talked
about
about earlier, Karsara setting up Hittusa. Like it's just funny.
exactly, yeah. That's one thing I
Oh,
like about starting so far back is it's a lot of stuff that no one's heard of before, but then when you get to the famous stuff, you have so much context and you see how everything got to that point, and it makes it feel like these like young bucks. Like by the time we get to like Plato and stuff, they're gonna seem like these like bratty like teenagers because they're like so much later than,
mhm.
everyone we've talked about. Than Gun Gunham.
Gun Gunham, man, I miss Gun Gunham.
And
He was cool.
honestly, we don't really reach the heights of the Bronze Age, which we're not even quite at yet. Like I feel like the end of the Bronze Age is as it's peaking, but like in terms of trade and everything, even in the early Iron Age, I feel like it's much more disconnected. That's one reason it is the Iron Age, is because there's less trade. So people are like, well, I guess I'll have to use this iron that is more prevalent. I can find it, but it's harder to work with. But they're like, well, I guess I'll figure it out, and they get used to iron. But weirdly, the Bronze Age is the peak of like world trade for hundreds and hundreds of years
Well, yeah,
after.
I mean, we're waiting for all the Neo empires. That's what I'm excited
We haven't
for.
even got to the Neos.
The
Yeah, the
Neo
cyberpunk.
Assyrian, the Neo Hittite, the Neo Babylonian. I'm excited for all of them.
So I'm sad to say, I wish I had something more exciting, but I did look into China, the Shang Dynasty, and
So,
this guy Xing Zhao made a massive rammed earth wall, which is literally this one that you're looking at right here. So
well,
it's
I Googled too because I wanted to know. I think I have it on my phone. I was like, exactly how are rammed earth fortifications built?
I was thinking that. I'm like, did they get like a big like tree trunk and like ram it?
No, so actually, wood's not really involved other than the shaping, but not in terms of the structure. So it's kind of like when you make a concrete pad. They would essentially outline it with wood, and then they would put in dirt and they would ram it down to about one half or one third its volume that it was before, and then they'd put on the next layer and ram it in, and then they remove the wood so that you have just a specific shape. And the advantage was it was still pretty resistant to battering rams and stuff like that. And even people tried to dig into it. And obviously it was fireproof, which is a huge advantage.
Yeah.
And swords and things couldn't pierce it. And if you rubbed it smooth, people couldn't climb up it. And I was like, that's crazy to think about. Like, I know
Oh
it seems
yeah.
obvious, but it's like, we'll just compact dirt. And it's like, no, that's enough. Like,
I feel
yeah.
like that's one thing that's so different nowadays is for most of human history. like not just your house, but just kind of your whole city and everything was based on your natural environment. So if you just had all this specific type of dirt, it's like that's just the best way to do it. And just I feel like it's so different now because no matter where you live in like America, for example, all the houses are essentially the same. Like they do look different, but like the
I think
basic
what you mean. It's a wood frame
materials.
with drywall, like
Yeah.
yeah, stucco on the
But I
outside.
think it's so much cooler when in terms of like if you were a traveler and you were going to these different places, like going to a desert and they live in like mud based houses, and then you go to a wooded area and they all live in wood houses, and you go, that's just a
Well, and it's crazy
cool
how
thing.
well the rammed earth stuff works because they talked about the
Yeah.
early, as much as we think of the Great Wall of China as like bricks and stuff like that, the early Great Wall of China under the Han Dynasty was mostly rammed earth, and it's still standing. A lot of it is.
Wow. I know you wouldn't think, but it kind of makes sense because first of all, people don't have an incentive to take it apart and use the raw materials. They just
Because it's
leave
just
it, and it's
dirt.
like
Yeah.
it's just dirt. I mean, like a mountain is just dirt, but but it still stays there.
Yeah, no, no, no. Yeah, I'm not trying to disparage it. It's more like exactly you said. Like,
No, I'm just
why
saying it
would I
makes
rip this
sense.
apart just to take the dirt? You're like, no, I'll just leave it.
Yeah.
So,
And then this was actually pretty cool. I looked into Japan, and they're in the Middle Jomon period, which is actually a high point for that culture. And this statue here is from the Jomon culture. And they came kind of in several different waves from um, the mainland of Asia, but they were there between the year a long time 14,000 BC, also known as negative 14,000,
ooh,
all the way to 300 BC, um,
also known as negative 300.
negative 300, and they were hunter gatherers and early agriculturalists. Um, and they were pretty sedentary, so they weren't like super hunter nomadic, and they were divided into six distinct phases. They eventually mixed with the other group. The Yayoi people were in a different part of Japan, and they made tools and jewelry out of bones, stone, shell, and antler. They had pottery, and it's noted for having cords pressed into the wet clay on the outside of the pottery. That was kind of their distinct thing. And there's this weird thing where apparently there's cultures in like South America called the Valdivia culture in Ecuador that
Mhm.
had um maybe it looked similar to the pottery, and it was the oldest pottery produced by a coastal culture in South America. And in the 60s, these researchers proposed this idea that they thought that somehow a Japanese fishing boat had like gotten off track and ended up in South America and like spread the pottery to there. Um, and they kind of didn't really ever believe them, but then later on they found out that there actually were earlier people in that area that had pottery. I guess there's something about the timing of it that like they just got the pottery really suddenly, and it
Like
looked
this
like
must have been like introduced by an outsider.
yeah, like why would they just invent it so quickly out of nowhere? But they just hadn't found all the evidence yet. But that I love any theory that is remotely similar to that. I just think is so cool. Of like, what if there was a, and it's not even really what we think of as a Japanese person. It's the people in Japan before that, and they wash up in Ecuador. That would
Yeah.
just be such a crazy concept. But yeah, so let's see what else about them. Um, this is what a crazy fact. The earliest Jamon pottery we have evidence for, the time period between the earliest version of it and the middle Jomon period that we're at now is twice as long as the span between the Great Pyramids of Giza and now.
Damn.
So I guess that means it's like 8,000 years, which makes sense because at the beginning I said they were there in like 12,000 or whatever. So
Mhm. But still,
anyway,
that's crazy.
pretty crazy. Yeah, because we think about now, all this history we've been talking about is so old, but they're even before that. And Another interesting thing, they think some Austronesian people, which are basically kind of the people that end up going to Indonesia and the Philippines and New Zealand and all this stuff. They there's like some words in the Jomon vocabulary, so they think they stopped by in Japan for a little bit, which kind of makes sense. And then lastly, talking about the Americas, we're still not in the Olmec yet, but there was the Barra phase in basically Guatemala around 1550 BC, and they found these like vessel things, these kind of
Oh
like
shit, that was the game
drinking cup.
from
Yep,
yeah.
yeah,
Why can't I think of it? El
El
Dorado.
Dorado.
Road to El Dorado, yeah.
And yeah, so they um had these rubber balls, which doesn't seem that exciting, but when you think about it, no one really had rubber yet, but they had these rubber balls they would use for this game, which is kind of like early soccer, but instead of a goal, you would like get it into this tiny hole that was sticking out of the wall. And it's basically one of the oldest cultural institutions of like the Western Hemisphere. And speaking of the World Cup, basically I pretty much started here as far as I can
America
tell.
won. We won.
America just won against Bosnia.
Bosnia.
I know that is pretty wild that we're doing so well this year. All right, well that's actually all I've really got. I feel like that was pretty solid though. We did. Oh wow, it's been an hour.
It has. That's what I was saying. Like
I
I'm
did
not
not realize
yeah,
that.
it's been an hour, yeah. We thought
I
this would
got
be a short episode and it's
I got
just
lost in the sauce. I thought I would have said like 40 minutes tops. Wow. I told you I had a lot. I wasn't lying.
I mean, I actually thought you were lying. I was concerned.
I knew you
So
didn't believe me. So let's see. Next week, I wanted to kind of bring, I mean, obviously, like I said, there'll be the New Kingdom Egypt we can dive into. There'll be the actual like Kassites
I
and
want to talk about the Mitanni
Babylon.
Kingdom.
Mitanni, I also want to talk about them. I want to talk a little bit about Old Europe. I kind of looked a little bit into them. I want to talk about this is not really related, but I did see there's just this weird borderland area where China, Mongolia, Russia, and Kazakhstan all touch each other at this
Hmm.
border. And I tried to look at it on Google Maps, and like there's literally nothing there.
You're talking
It's
about modern China though, right?
modern.
Yeah.
I'm talking about modern, but I
Yeah.
was just looking because that area that I'm talking about is where a lot of the I think it's literally where the Indo-Europeans might have came from, or it's where a lot of some of at least the nomadic horse riding people came from. So I was looking at the area, but it just made me think it's like in the mountains and there's
Mhm.
literally nothing there. It's just like some roads I could not see. Because I thought maybe there'd be like a border wall or something, but anyway, I just hadn't looked in that area before.
Well, that's funny. So technically Mongolia though and Kazakhstan don't touch.
Well, there's some place where they're all super close to each
Oh
other.
no, 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 you're right. No, no, no. I thought they were touching, so I zoomed in and I was like, oh, is this like a four corners situation? And it's not by like not a lot, but by like 10 miles. They don't. So they're so close.
But actually, yeah, if you look at like this picture,
Yeah,
like
right there. I was so bummed. I thought it was gonna be all four of them touch, but they don't.
but I mean they essentially do. Like
Well, they do. Yeah, I'm not trying to play semantics. I just meant
yeah, if
it's
you look at that area on a map where all the four touch, they it really is just kind of the middle of nowhere. But anyway, yeah, apparently that's where a lot of the steppe people actually came from, which I might get into that next week.
yes.
And on that note, oh, this is important. We excuse me. We will not have an episode next week. I had considered maybe trying to schedule something because I'm going to go on a trip, but just didn't know if it would really work out. And I want to put my full effort into each episode. So, everyone out there, go outside, touch grass. I don't know how you normally listen to this podcast, but it's a good opportunity to enjoy the summer, go to the beach, have a Aperol Spritz.
Unless you live in the southern hemisphere,
Well, I don't.
then it's
I,
winter.
I hope you don't
So
listen to this podcast if you're from that hemisphere. No.
wow.
The Australians. I'm
The
coming for you.
Australians, and then everyone in South America. Well, most of.
Yeah, no, I'm obviously joking.
Well, no,
But
I'd be
let's
surprised if
see.
you weren't.
After the break, we will come back better than ever. And I don't know, I guess we can talk about it right now, but do you want to try to do just like 1750 to 1700 since we're taking a week off and then we can
I
come
get
back?
what you're saying, but I think you mean 1550 to
I meant 15.
1500. Yeah,
1550 to
I think
1500.
that'll work. I haven't looked into it a ton, but I think that'll be.
We can talk off mic, but
But we can commit to that
we'll
now, and
see.
if it changes, it changes. But we can commit to that now.
Just because we'll technically have twice as long, even though I'll be on a
Yeah,
trip. But and I don't think a lot obviously happens, but this week I will admit that it was a lot of just me summarizing things we'd already talked about. Um, so maybe it'd be nice to have like just more events that happen.
yeah,
But I think it was, I don't know, I always like to set the scene, kind of just like, because for me at least, the first time I hear something, it doesn't really stick. I feel like I need to kind of like think about it again and like, re-review it and all that kind of stuff. So
yeah.
anyway, but follow us on Instagram, Lost Decades Pod. I don't have a YouTube comment to read this week, but leave a comment, leave a review, leave a 5-star review, please. I think that's all. Well, while I am away, I am glad I have Google Maps so that I don't get lost.